I wish I'd been warned that I was going first, because I would have known that I am in danger of being sat upon. But never mind. Let's start off with a sing-along text by the picture at the beginning of the chapter of Litva. If you can't see it, it's Batka himself, Daddy Lukashenko. It's a pity, really, that the photograph is not one of him and the heir to the throne, Little Nicky, in his specially made general's uniform. I want to start, like Norman does, from now and work backwards. Two things happened last week. One of them quite unmentionable, but it really has to be remembered. And that is what amounts to virtually a summary execution of one of the two young men found guilty after a trial that doesn't really merit the name of a terrorist act in Minsk in April last year. Entirely without warning, we are now told by a Mr. Zissa, who is in charge of one of the biggest internet service providers and very big in the communications field, that it would not have happened if the opposition had kept quiet. This is a kind of Alice through the looking glass world in which my family lives, in which I visit very regularly. The other thing was also on last week, was to do with Mr. Lukashenko, as of course everything is in effect in Belarus. It's not a country without law. The problem is where the law emanates from. And the particular thing I have in mind is something that occurred on the 15th last week, Thursday I think if my memory serves, when somebody calling himself Professor, an odious man with the name of Leo Kristapovich, and I use the word odious deliberately, he is described as deputy head of the Information Analytics Center of the Presidential Administration, therefore a big noise. At a round-table meeting in Minsk, I'm going to add to the nomenclatural cacophony here, in Minsk, not Minsk, which is a Polish name, in Minsk, a round-table was called, and I've translated this literally because I don't quite know what it means in English, the religious factor of national security of the Republic of Belarus. Say, and there is on every opposition website a copy of this interview, speech to television. It went up immediately. Attempts to derive Belarusian nationality from the period of the so-called Grand Duchy of Lithuania are far removed from the real process of our spiritual growth and development. In other words, it has nothing to do with our past whatsoever. And Belarusian nationality is better explained, and I quote this literally, I am not kidding. Belarusian nationality is better expressed in the word that he used is solomopletenie, the weaving of straw, making corn dollies. That is what we are reduced to. In other words, it's time to throw the Grand Duchy of Lithuania on the scrap heap of history. So what really is the connection between modern Belarus and modern Lithuania, and why is this an urgent question, and why are there so many differing opinions? Let me return to 1954 and quote a Lithuanian historian who worked for most of his life as an immigrant in Germany, Zenonas Ivinskis, who said that there cannot be a truly independent Lithuania without an independent Belarus. I would be grateful for my colleagues' help in finding the source of this quotation, because I've got it in a way that I don't particularly like, it's second-hand, but I'm absolutely sure it's correct. And since then, you have to consider the oddity of the writing of history in the Soviet Union. Lithuanian historians in the Lithuanian Soviet Socialist Republic could write about the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Historians in the Belarusian Soviet Socialist Republic could not, unless it was to say in the 40s and 50s that the Lithuanians were the aggressors and the conquerors, or later on in the Brezhnev period, well, you couldn't really say anything at all. If you go back in time, you can see one of the complexities is the relationship of Vilna, again, cacophony, to Belarus. It wasn't part of the original Soviet Belarusian Republic that was declared in 1919. Then somebody in Moscow decided that it would be a good idea in the joint Lithuanian Belarusian Soviet Socialist Republic to have Vilna as part of Lithuania and Belarus. Then as the last, I believe he was the last Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Lithuania before 1939. He was as Urpris. I'm sorry if I get my stresses wrong. Sorry about that. Reports in his memoirs that were published in Vilnius, I will now say in 1988, that Stalin offered Vilnius to the Lithuanian Republic if they would allow the placing of bases on Lithuania. Moving forwards in time to 2003, the Duma of the Russian Federation, and this I think needs to be remembered all the time, has on record as saying that if the Lithuanians repudiate what happened in 1939, then the state must return to the frontiers of that year. In other words, give Vilnius back to who? To Poland? To Belarus? Or what? So Vilnius is a place of contention in this area as a whole. If we think about a number of questions to do with the history of Belarus, then we have to face a few facts head-on. The area that is now called Belarus was clearly part of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Norman demonstrates this, you've seen it on the maps. What do we call the people who lived there? If we call them Lithuanians, we are confusing the issue. Norman uses the word Lithuanian, I think probably deliberately, in two senses in this chapter. Where is the word to describe people who were citizens of the Grand Duchy, but were not by language, or if I dare say the word ethnicity, Lithuanian? The term Belarus, Belarusia, did not really exist in the meaning of what it now means at the time. Except, of course, if we follow Maciej Stryjkowski, who helpfully calls people Bieloruscy, Litevscy, if I quote him correctly. And a Calvinist from Polotsk, up there, called Rysinski, who was a student at Altdorf University, which used to be just outside Nuremberg, in the 16th century, signs himself as Solomono Pantero, which is how he translates into Latin Rysinski, Rys, Leukorusso, Leukorussos, Leuko, Greek for white. So the term was used, but please, if there are any questions, if anybody is desperately formulating a question, where does the white come from in White Ruthenia, I can answer, but the answer will not be final and will go on for about 50 minutes. What we have now, since 1990, since Belarus acquired independence, is a kind of, if not war between historians, but a sort of very uneasy disagreement. And I want to express my view of that disagreement. I'm not a professional historian, but I think, as in so many cases, the person who has put my view best is Anton Pavlovich Chekhov, in a story called Pismo k Učenому Sosiedu, a letter to a learned neighbour, in which the learned neighbour, disagreeing with the fact that there can be such things as black spots on the sun, writes, "Этого не может быть, потому что это не может быть никогда." This can't possibly be true because it can never be true. And I think both sides, Lithuanian historians and Belarusian historians, are guilty of